Can you hear me without the microphone? Good afternoon. I'm Donald McQuaid, and I have the honor of serving as the Vice Chancellor of University Relations here at UC Berkeley. On behalf of Chancellor Robert Bergeneau and my colleagues on the Berkeley faculty, as well as on behalf of our students and staff, it is my distinct privilege and pleasure to welcome the Prime Minister of Denmark, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, to the University of California, Berkeley. Mr. Prime Minister, you have established a singularly distinguished and exemplary career in governmental leadership, and the people of Denmark, as well as the international community, have benefited enormously from your commitment to the principled stewardship of liberty as a universal value and your unwavering commitment to the right of every person to freedom and democracy. As I trust you know, these are values and principles that the faculty and students and staff at UC Berkeley put into practice every day. We're also honored that you have come to visit with us today after having spent time with President Bush at Camp David. The press accounts here in the U.S. were particularly laudatory of your ability to keep pace with the President as he set about going about the mountains on his mountain bike ride. So our special congratulations. He's either famous or notorious for the pace of his bike rides. I would like to address very briefly the immediate context for your visit, Mr. Prime Minister. We here at UC Berkeley take great pride in having one of 3 Scandinavian studies departments in the United States, and dare I say the best among them. And your visit with us today signals an important renewal of the historic relationship between UC Berkeley and the people of Denmark and other Scandinavian countries. A second and more immediate context is the strong and productive relationship between the University of California, Berkeley and the University of Copenhagen. Both are founding members of a new alliance, the International Alliance for Research Universities. This is a 10-member organization that was formed just about a year ago and had its first meeting in Singapore. And it includes Berkeley and Yale as the 2 U.S. participants, Oxford and Cambridge from the United Kingdom, the University of Copenhagen and the ETH in Zurich, and Peking University, Tokyo University, the National University of Singapore, and the Australian National University. The kind of productive work that will emerge out of this alliance is something that we're all looking forward to. More recently, there have been strong and yet ever more promising connections between Danish supporters of our CITRIS initiative and issues of regional economic growth. There is a growing awareness in Denmark of the role of CITRIS and the role that it's playing in creating technological improvements on economies and societies. Before I turn to my distinguished colleague Shankar Sastry, who will introduce you more formally, I thought I would ask you to step forward, and on behalf of the Berkeley campus, and particularly of Chancellor Bergeneau, I'd like to present you with a small token of your visit here and a small token of our appreciation for your visit. It's an honor for us to have you here. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. I also have 2 of these small little pamphlets. One for you and one for your wife.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. For a more nuanced introduction to the matters of CITRIS, I would like to invite my distinguished colleague and friend Shankar Sastry to the podium. Professor Sastry is the director of the CITRIS program, which is the most prominent of the 4 California Institutes for Science and Innovation established in 2001, established to develop the next generation of technologies that will be critical to sustaining California's economic growth and global competitiveness. Professor Sastry received his PhD from UC Berkeley in 1981, and after teaching at MIT and Harvard, where he exercised the good judgment and the common sense of returning to UC Berkeley, where he serves as the chair of Berkeley's Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. Professor Sastry has been recognized for his many achievements by having been named the NEC Distinguished Professor of Engineering. My friend and colleague, Shankar Sastry.
Thank you very much. I know that we're all waiting for the Prime Minister, so I'll keep my remarks brief. Let me first say, dear Honourable Prime Minister Anders Fogh Rasmussen, Anna Mette Rasmussen, Ambassador Arne Petersen, Swedish Consul Barbara Auscher, and honoured guests. I cannot tell you what a distinct pleasure it is to welcome you all to the University of California. A very warm welcome to you, and we are personally quite thrilled that you've thought it worth your while to spend this time with us. Let me just say a few words of welcome to you, Honourable Prime Minister. An oft-quoted line, actually I have to say our Vice-Chancellor is a professor of English, so I thought I had to try to look literate today. An oft-quoted line from Shakespeare's Hamlet, Act 1, Scene 4, when Officer Marcellus has just encountered the ghost of Hamlet's father is, "Something is rotten in the state of Denmark." I feel that from reading your accomplishments and from reading about the state of Denmark, and most recently the OECD Economic Survey of Denmark 2006, there is nothing rotten about the state of Denmark. Congratulations on making Denmark a model of a socialist state with an extensive reform of government efficiency and free market policies in support of innovation and industry. Your policies have resulted in record low unemployment and high budget and current account surpluses. And in the US, we have a great deal to learn from the dexterity with which you have reorganized several key governmental agencies and made Denmark a robust and prosperous economy. Indeed, a number of your ideas about the in-housing of innovation, which you have shared with your think tank, Mandag Morgen, have found deep resonance with us. Niels Christian Nielsen, next to you, and others from the Monday Morning have helped us understand the deep parallels between the challenges and opportunities confronting Denmark and those of the Bay Area. As you've noted in your recent speeches, we share the problem in the Bay Area of insourcing innovation in the face of outsourcing of commodity technologies, such as hardware, software, and a great deal of manufacturing. We believe that the problems of Scandinavia and Denmark of providing for prosperity in the face of this commoditization of technology are quite common to that of a high-wage area like the Bay Area. 2 years ago, Niels Christian Nielsen, John Zeisman from the Berkeley Roundtable and the International Economy, Riku Makela and Kimmo Ahala from Tekes in Finland joined us in CITRIS to set up what we call the Innovation Alliance, whose primary goal is to study the insourcing of innovation. In late 2004, we began a joint project with initial focus on the use of information and communication technologies for better delivery of healthcare. We began a joint project between the University of Aarhus, the Alexandria Institute, and Professor Morten Kyung, and Professor Jakob Staudstrup from the University of Aalborg, along with faculty at VTT, Tampere Institute of Technology, and the Helsinki Institute of Technology, to develop some prototype solutions for better telemedicine in people's homes. In particular, we've been interested in the use of wireless sensor webs for keeping track of the state of chronically ill people or a graying population. The security and privacy considerations inherent in such a system make this project an important one for us at CITRIS. CITRIS is an institute geared at marrying the technology push for new technologies with the needs of societal scale systems, such as those that we have encountered here in healthcare. I'm very pleased to see that our project has made tremendous progress and has attracted the attention of major industrial partners, such as IBM, Nokia, and Qualcomm. We will be celebrating this collaboration with our newest results, which we'll be presenting in a CITRIS in Europe event in Helsinki next week on June 20th and 21st in conjunction with the EU program in IST, Information Science and Technology. I should also mention, in addition to the ties that Don mentioned, that we have had a wonderful exchange program between Berkeley and the Danish Rectors Conference, the Rektorkollegiet, for the exchange of faculty, researchers, and graduate students. This is currently on the books. It's been exceedingly good at bringing us some of the best students and colleagues from Denmark. It seems to be slated to end as of 2006. However, we are optimistic that it will be renewed and continue to be a basis for further exchanges. So I will not detract any more. I think the people are quite restively waiting for your speech. So let me just say on a personal note, I can see from your great bonhomie and charm that it's easy to see why President Silvio Berlusconi was really on track when in 2002 he called you the most handsome prime minister in Europe. This is a little tongue-in-cheek, I think, which is best known to you. I was told I might regret having said this. But it was in less risque fashion than Berlusconi, I should say. So let me welcome you once again very warmly, and I look forward to your comments on a topic that concerns us all: partnership in a globalized world, a Declaration of Independence. The Secret Service would not let me wrap this, but I do have a little gift for you. This is the Berkeley Bear suspended inside this lucite. But what is further striking about it is that there's a piece of smart dust attached to the nose of the bear.
Oh.
It's currently turned off, so it's not listening to anything that you say.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
I hope you don't mind about the
No, it's okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Vice Chancellor, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. Can you all hear me without this one? Yeah, good, because I would prefer it that way, but otherwise you should tell me. It is indeed an honor and a great privilege to speak at this prestigious university. Thank you very much for inviting me, and a special thanks to Director John Seisman from Berkeley Roundtable on the International Economy and Director Sastry from CITRIS for arranging this event. I've been looking very much forward to visiting Berkeley, and I'm delighted that the ties between Berkeley and the University of Copenhagen have been further strengthened. My theme today will be globalization. I think globalization brings new opportunities and challenges for governments, companies, and citizens throughout the world. Political, economic, and cultural ties across borders are maturing and becoming stronger. The world is becoming more open. Globalization holds opportunities to increase prosperity, to ensure better jobs, and to take active part in international developments. As students at this advanced university, you are at the very edge in formulating strategies that make it possible to benefit from globalization. There are some who look at globalization as a threat. They look at the impressive growth rates of China and India and worry about outsourcing of jobs. They look at the rapid exchange of people, goods, and services as threat to the world they know. They question whether we can preserve our national identity and way of life. There are even some who believe in resurrecting trade barriers and working to maintain status quo. I believe they take the wrong approach. Globalization is a fact, and we have to embrace it by going on the offensive, both nationally and through international cooperation. Nationally, each country has to prepare itself for the global competition. Thus, my government recently launched a comprehensive strategy to prepare Denmark for the future. The aim is to maintain Denmark's position as one of the world's richest countries, but, and it's important to emphasize, but without destroying the social fabric. We want to avoid a fragmented society where those who are not equipped for the labour market of the future fall by the wayside. The aim of the strategy is to achieve the combination of competitive power and strong cohesion that is at the very core of the Danish model. We must continue to put people first and to develop the quality of our human resources. It entails extensive reforms of education and training, research and entrepreneurship, as well as substantial improvements in the framework conditions for growth and innovation in all areas of society. And I'm pleased to inform you that copies of the strategy on preparing for globalization in Denmark are available in the room. International action is needed to allow us to benefit fully from the opportunities that emanate from globalization, as well as to cope with the challenges and threats that characterize a globalized world. I will make the argument that such international action is contingent on close cooperation between Europe and the United States, a strong transatlantic partnership. Ladies and gentlemen, first a couple of words on interdependence. Globalization has brought all countries closer together, but no one closer than the United States and Europe. We have built our societies on shared respect for freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. We share common values, and our values are the main driving force behind globalization. At the same time, these very values are being challenged by forces that do not want free, open and democratic societies, let alone the rule of law. But even in the face of these challenges, we are united in our continued defense of our common values and our determined promotion of these values globally. And we share more than ideas and values across the Atlantic. Our economies are far more interdependent than those of any other part of the world. The European Union and the United States are each other's main trading partners. Even more significant, the level of mutual investment is the highest between two major economies. On the political side, the North Atlantic Treaty has been the pivot of transatlantic security. The alliance itself is the embodiment of the undivided security that has been evident for more than half a century. Together, we managed to put an end to communism, to unite Europe divided by the Berlin Wall, and to bring peace in the Balkans, where ethnic conflicts followed the end of the Cold War. The facts speak for themselves. The United States and Europe are strongly interdependent. The big question then is, how do we act on this interdependence? In 1962, President Kennedy called for a Declaration of Interdependence. The background for his speech was the very early stages of European integration that was envisioned as a first step towards a United States of Europe. Well, we didn't exactly make it that far in Europe, but I find it illuminating to recapture what President Kennedy envisioned as the outcome of closer cooperation with a unified Europe. In his words, acting on our own, by ourselves, we cannot establish justice throughout the world. We cannot ensure its domestic tranquility, or provide for its common defense, or promote its general welfare, or secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. But joined with other free nations, we can do all this and more. We can assist the developing nations to throw off the yoke of poverty. We can balance our worldwide trade and payments at the highest possible level of growth. We can mount a deterrent powerful enough to deter any aggression. And ultimately, we can help to achieve a world of law and free choice, banishing the world of war and coercion. And he continued, for the Atlantic Partnership of which I speak would not look inward only, preoccupied with its own welfare and advancement. It must look outward to cooperate with all nations in meeting their common concern. It would serve as a nucleus for the eventual union of all free men, those who are now free and those who are now vowing that someday they will be free. This was a vision presented 44 years ago, but I believe that the very premise of the vision still holds true. A transatlantic partnership should not be inward-looking. Instead, while working towards strengthened cooperation within the Euro-Atlantic area, the main object of a transatlantic partnership should be a joint approach to the global issues outside the Euro-Atlantic area. That is my vision of a transatlantic partnership for the 21st century. And I see 4 key areas for transatlantic cooperation where we should focus our efforts on concrete initiatives. Firstly, the creation of a transatlantic marketplace which will not only benefit the transatlantic economy, but the world economy as such. Secondly, the reform of the North Atlantic Alliance to meet the new security challenges. Thirdly, the support of reform and progress in the broader Middle East. And finally, sustainable development, which would include both joint efforts to combat poverty, especially in Africa, and efforts to ensure the supply of energy. First, the vision of a transatlantic marketplace without barriers to trade and investment. It is true that much of the discussion today is focused on emerging economies such as China and India. And they do have impressive growth rates. They have achieved significant economic results. They are becoming important players in the global economy and competitors to both the European Union and the United States. However, let us not forget that the EU and the United States are responsible for 2/5 of the world trade. We are each other's largest trading and investment partners. And the overall, let's call it transatlantic workforce, is estimated at 12 to 14 million, of which roughly half are Americans who owe their jobs directly or indirectly to EU companies. In fact, I'm pleased that a number of executives from Danish companies working in California are accompanying me today. It's also worth noting that 85% of US global investments in professional, scientific and technical services are placed in the European Union. Achieving the vision of a transatlantic marketplace will, of course, take time. Within Europe, we have spent the last 50 years building an internal market. The elimination of barriers to trade has at times been difficult and is the result of a determined effort and strong political resolve. It has been a gradual approach. But today, we have free movement of goods in Europe. We have liberalized financial services, and a few weeks ago, we agreed on the liberalization of services in general. Some countries have been hesitant to give up what they perceived as legitimate national interests. But today, we see the results. Since 1992, the internal market has created more than 2.5 million new jobs in Europe and added more than 800 billion euros to European wealth. It is my sincere hope that we together can make the same determined political effort to create a transatlantic marketplace, the largest in the world, where we can benefit from developing the transatlantic economic integration to the fullest, spur innovation and job creation, and realize the full competitive potential of our economies and companies. And let's not forget that our economic and trade relations affect not only our own prosperity and development, but also that of third countries and regions. We have a responsibility to contribute effectively to international economic stability and growth, and to broaden our bilateral economic dialogue. Together with partners, first and foremost in Asia and Latin America, we can make globalization work for all. A transatlantic marketplace is not and should not be an exclusive club for the rich countries. It will benefit all. I do believe that the creation of a transatlantic marketplace could be a powerful driving force in our endeavors to liberalize the world trade in general. And it should, of course, be combined with a determined effort to make the WTO negotiations a success. Ladies and gentlemen, my second point in a strengthened transatlantic cooperation is a reform of the North Atlantic Alliance, NATO, to meet the new security threats. Terrorism, weapons of mass destruction, fragile states, and not least the nexus between them, have become greater threats in today's globalized world. For instance, terrorists use and misuse the very means of globalization: the media, information technology, the internet, and the mobility of people and goods. And threats to our security, more often than not, originate in countries and regions far away from the Euro-Atlantic area. But these issues are very different from the circumstances that led to the foundation of NATO in 1949. NATO is a true child of the Cold War. For half a century, a shared concern for a military threat to European security was at the heart of the transatlantic agenda. Today, the old transatlantic agenda that focused on European security has largely played out. The fact that the role of the alliance has not been played out demonstrates its ability to adapt to the new threats to security. In this new security environment, many expected NATO to stagnate. Instead, it stood up to the plate, becoming what it is today, a very flexible and effective instrument for promoting stability in the world. But the alliance still needs to continue its development. NATO should be capable of engaging wherever and whenever needed. The operations in Afghanistan and Sudan are the most striking examples of this. But also NATO's support to Pakistan in the wake of the earthquake, and even NATO's support to the United States after Hurricane Katrina, bear witness to the global nature of NATO. And that is why I support an alliance engaged in global partnerships with countries like Australia, New Zealand and Japan that can and are willing to defend our common values. Likewise, NATO must develop its capabilities to win the peace once we have won the war. For some time, it was fashion to portray the United States as the hard power, being over-reliant on military force, and the Europeans as the soft power, being hesitant to deploy its armed forces outside Europe. Maybe the stereotypes were not completely false, but today there is a strong mutual understanding for the need of both hard and soft power to solve the most complex security challenges of today, namely terrorism. In order to win the peace, we must improve our ability and capability in nation building. That is why the alliance should further develop the concept of civil-military cooperation. And that is why the alliance should work much closer together with other international organizations and non-governmental organizations. Only by using all instruments available to us will we be able to solve daunting tasks like, for instance, Afghanistan. Ladies and gentlemen, the third key area of transatlantic cooperation is the broader Middle East. Globalization has the potential not only to stimulate economic development, but also to strengthen individual freedom. Modern information and communication technology expands people's opportunities to share ideas and acquire knowledge. The mobility of people allows for networking and broadening of horizons. Nevertheless, there are still strong obstacles standing in the way of such a development in the Middle East, and the result is an acute deficit of freedom. Combined with economic stagnation and rapid demographic changes, it is a source of frustration that can play into the hands of extremists and terrorists. Therefore, we share a common interest to make the peoples of the Middle East benefit from globalization. And indeed, the desire for change and democracy is widespread throughout the Middle East, as also the recent elections in Iraq demonstrated. Distinguished experts from the region have set out to analyze why there is such a lack of progress in the Middle East. They present their analysis in the UNDP's Arab Human Development Reports, which demonstrate the profound need for reform in the region. Both Europe and the United States have a strong interest in supporting this quest for reform and progress in the broader Middle East. And I see three areas where we need for focus. Firstly, on promotion of freedom and democracy. secondly, on free trade, and thirdly, on regional cooperation. First, on freedom and democracy. According to the Arab Human Development Report, the political restrictions on development are the most stubborn. They point to three major deficits concerning freedom and good governance, knowledge acquisition, and women's empowerment. The point is that the people in the region themselves want to address those deficits. All surveys show that the people in the Arab world favor democracy and human rights. Actually, when compared to other regions, the Arab world tops the list of those agreeing that democracy is better than any other form of governance. Quite interesting. So there is a strong desire for change, and Europe and the United States should continue their efforts to support the moderate forces that strive for reforms. Denmark has launched a program for progress and reform in the Arab world. In this program, Denmark offers partnership and cooperation on specific reform processes aimed at reducing the three deficits in dialogue with recipients, primarily in the civil society. Recent events involving Denmark, burning flags, burning embassies, violent protests, have served to strengthen our conviction and resolve in this regard. The second point of focus in the Middle East should be free trade. The Middle East economies are to a high degree detached from the global economy, and the result in recent years has been slow economic growth. That, combined with growing populations, have led to unemployment and poverty in the region. Europe and the United States have a strong role to play in opening up to trade with the Middle East. The European Union has already signed association treaties removing barriers to trade with a number of the countries in the region. And the third point of focus should be regional cooperation. The Middle East is one of few regions that does not have an organizational framework for regional cooperation. This has a negative impact on the region in relation to economic development, security, and the environment. It also has a negative impact on the world outside the region, especially in relation to security and stability. I strongly believe that the transatlantic experience and cooperation should help facilitate a process towards stronger regional cooperation. In Europe, we learned the hard way that lack of confidence in your neighbor leads to instability, conflict, and even war. Therefore, together with the United States, we launched a process of building confidence between countries and peoples, the so-called Conference on Security Cooperation in Europe, CSCE. Similarly, I think we need a conference on security cooperation in the Middle East. And together with Canada, Denmark is promoting an initiative aimed at enhancing Middle Eastern security cooperation. It has strong participation so far on an informal basis from all the major players in the region. I'm confident that this process in the future can move to the formal intergovernmental level, although some governments are still skeptic. It takes time to overcome decades of mistrust and lack of confidence in your neighbors. But I think that the current situation with Iraq's nuclear program may remind responsible leaders in the region of the dire prospects for peace and stability if you do not establish regional and international cooperation to counter such threats to stability. Ladies and gentlemen, the final key area of transatlantic cooperation is the challenge to ensure sustainable development. Let me first turn to Africa. Last year, I traveled to Africa. I saw the poverty, I saw the victims of HIV/AIDS, but I also saw something else. I saw the will and the determination of ordinary Africans and that of key African leaders to change this to the better. Earlier this year, I met with a number of prominent African leaders in Copenhagen. Again, I was reinforced in my belief that Africa is not a continent lost. It is a continent on the brink of a new beginning. Indeed, Africa is ready to move forward and become an active player in the globalized world. However, Africa needs assistance from both the European Union and the United States. Globalization can give Africa opportunities for progress and growth, but focused action is called for. The most important of all is greater international trade. Often, the focus is on giving the poor countries access to our markets, and indeed we must. That is why we need a global agreement in the WTO negotiations. But first and foremost, the developing countries need to open their markets to each other by removing the tariff and trade barriers separating them. In Africa, there are high tariff rates, requirements for import licenses, protracted customs handling, and complicated procedures. There is a lot to be gained if the developing countries open up their economies and promote free trade among each other. According to the World Bank, the developing countries will be able to gain approximately $142 billion by implementing full liberalization of international agricultural trade. By far the largest share of this gain, namely approximately $114 billion, may be achieved through reforms in the developing countries themselves. And in our approach to Africa, we should bear in mind that we are not only assisting, we are investing in what could soon be a dynamic African market, and like Asia before it, an important part of the global market. Those investments should be directed at the very infrastructures necessary to promote free trade and sustainable development in the region. Then let me turn to another topical element dealing with sustainable development: energy. Both the United States and Europe are, for different reasons, facing the challenge of reducing our dependency on fossil fuels, because it's becoming too expensive, to reduce our dependency on foreign suppliers in order to effectively reduce climate change. The challenge poses the question whether or not it is possible to combine economic growth and the use of alternative energy sources. In fact, the Danish experience shows that a clear focus on renewable energy need not to be to the detriment of economic growth. Taught by the experiences of the oil crisis of the 1970s, Denmark has for decades focused on measures to increase the use of renewable energy and to increase energy efficiency. During the last 25 years, Denmark's economy has grown by more than 50% without any increase in the consumption of energy. And at the same time, many international benchmarks rank Denmark as one of the most competitive countries globally. I have to say that this has not been achieved overnight. It is a result of a massive effort focusing on a wide range of initiatives, regulatory as well as tax-related. Today, Denmark is in the forefront on many of these issues. 21% of all electric power consumed in Denmark is produced by windmills, 21%. Bioenergy now composes 11% of total energy consumption. And later today, I will visit some of the Danish companies that are active here in California. I think that the US and Europe must cooperate closely on the energy dossier. Let me point to 3 possible areas for cooperation. Firstly, the development of new energy technologies. We are already cooperating on the development of environmental technologies, most importantly, in a project to develop fusion energy. But we should go even further. Secondly, we should work to increase the use of alternative sources of energy. We should develop and use cost-effective wind energy, bioenergy, and solar energy. And thirdly, we must do more in relation to energy efficiency. Ladies and gentlemen, I have outlined my vision of a transatlantic partnership for the 21st century. And I have pointed out 4 key areas for strengthened cooperation. I started out quoting President Kennedy. He was not only right to point out the need for a transatlantic partnership that was outward-looking. He was also right to point out the need for strong European cooperation to allow for such a partnership with the United States. There is a need for a strengthened transatlantic partnership to ensure prosperity and security in a globalized world. The challenges we are facing in the globalized world are demanding. However, by facing them together and by sharing a common responsibility, we can take advantage of the opportunities provided by globalization. We can make globalization a success to the benefit of all peoples in the world. Thank you very much.
That was really a very exciting set of vistas for the future. I'd like to give folks in the audience a chance to ask questions. We are being simulcast, so if you could use the microphone, that would help. There are people with microphones.
Thank you very much for your remarks, Mr. Prime Minister. I'm a graduate student here in political science, and with family back in Denmark, I've discussed with them some of the other side of globalization, the domestic aspect. And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned briefly about some of the riots and the burnings of embassies that happened related to the cartoon incident earlier this year. I wanted to ask you about what constitutes Danish national identity, because in conversations I've had with family, there's been discussion about whether Danish Muslims can build a mosque in Copenhagen, and discussions about whether something so foreign to Denmark, which has a historically Christian cultural background, that would seem too foreign in Copenhagen. And so my question is more general, is how do the Danes see their national identity as the flip side of globalization is bringing people from other countries from the Middle East into Denmark, creating a society today which is much more multicultural and multi-ethnic than Denmark has historically been. Thank you.
What constitutes Danish national identity? That's really a complicated question, and I don't think it is possible for me in a few minutes to describe that. But let me put it another way. Denmark is an open-minded, tolerant and liberal society. We're well known for that, and the cartoon controversy doesn't change that, not at all. The cartoon controversy was not about cartoons, but about tensions, domestic tensions in the Muslim world. Actually, a survey which was published recently indicated that the Danish people is the people in Europe which is in the strongest possible way positive towards globalization. I think, if I remember correctly, around 80% of the people asked in this survey answered that they had a positive attitude towards globalization. They consider globalization an opportunity and not a threat. Other polls and surveys indicate exactly the same. This is really the attitude of the Danish people: open-minded, tolerant, liberal. As far as the possibility to build a mosque is concerned, the Danish society is based on the principle of freedom of religion. That is, each individual can freely exercise his or her religion, including build or construct buildings for religious ceremonies, churches, mosques, and everything. There are no restrictions on that whatsoever. So it's only a question of funding, and I think this is a reason why a mosque has not been constructed yet in Denmark, that it has not been possible for the Muslim communities to provide funds for it. Actually, they do have mosques in other buildings, but a real mosque, as we know mosques, has not been built yet, but I think it's because of a lack of funding. There are no legislative restrictions on that in Denmark.
I'm Michael Nacht. I'm Dean of the Goldman School of Public Policy on the campus. You articulated a very visionary view of the future of NATO, an expansive view. Today, the Iranian government basically reissued the statement that its right to enrich uranium to any levels it sees fit is non-negotiable. President Bush has articulated a June 29th deadline for the Iranian government to respond to the recent proposal that was agreed upon by the Russians, Chinese, British, French, and Germans and Americans. Assuming that there is not a positive response by the Iranians to this proposal, what do you think that NATO, what do you think that the European Union, what do you think that individual European countries are prepared to do to impose economic sanctions or to provide incentives for the Iranians to come to the negotiating table and to avoid further difficulties down the road?
Thank you very much. We are strongly concerned about the nuclear program in Iran. I think it is premature to make any comment on what is going to happen or what should happen, provided a negative answer from the Iranian government. We are strongly in favor of diplomatic solutions to this Iranian problem. This is the reason why I have commended the American president for the US decision to join the European allies, Russia and China, in a joint effort to maximize diplomatic pressure on Iran. The permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany have presented a package of proposals to Iran, including an annex which describes what is called possible measures. So in this annex you will see an indication of what might happen if the Iranian government responds negatively to this, to the pressure from the international community. But I think it is premature to go into details with that. It's a list of possible measures using, I would say, sticks and carrots, and I still hope that the Iranian government will take stock of the situation and choose cooperation instead of international isolation, which might be the outcome of a negative answer. And we support the proposal from the 6 countries, and we support the position that Iran must suspend enrichment and enrichment-related activities 100%.
I'm Sevi Hadzopoulou. I'm visiting scholar at the Department of Political Science here from Denmark. I would like to ask you, Mr. Prime Minister, we know that there has been a big break about the EU Constitution in the European Union. Could you bring us a little bit of your insight on the Danish view about the future of the EU Constitution?
Well, I'm in favor of the so-called constitutional treaty. I'm in favor of the new treaty because it provides us with a better framework for the cooperation among 27 member states than the current treaty. The current treaty was created for a union of 15. But since then we have enlarged the European Union, and soon we will be 27. And of course it makes a difference if you're 15 around the table or 27. So we need a new institutional framework for our cooperation in the European Union. This is the reason why I'm in favor of the constitutional treaty. However, this treaty has been rejected in 2 referenda in France and the Netherlands. And according to our rules, a new treaty must be adopted unanimously. And it is impossible as long as 2 countries are not able to ratify because of the outcome of the referenda. In Denmark, we had planned a referendum on the new treaty. But we have postponed this referendum because we need a clarification of the position of France and the Netherlands before we can proceed in the ratification process. So, in conclusion, I'm in favor of the constitutional treaty. I would very much like to see it ratified. However, we must respect the outcome of the referenda in France and the Netherlands. So, the European Union has now decided to have what we call a period of reflection. Later this week, we're going to have a new EU summit, and at this summit, we will decide to prolong this period of reflection. I think until June next year, after the elections in France and the Netherlands. And yeah. So we will reflect and then come up with an idea how to proceed. But anyway, I think we need I think we need a better framework for our cooperation than the current treaty. So I feel confident that we will see a new treaty in a not too distant future. The question is, which treaty?